Returning back to The Rape of the Mind, we are now in Chapter 7, The Intrusion by Totalitarian Thinking. In order to investigate the social forces at work, undermining the free individual development of man's mind, we have to look at manifold aspects of political life. As a clinician and polypragmatist, I don't want to bind myself to one political state or current, but want to describe what can be experienced in social life everywhere. Where human thinking and human habits are in the process of being remolded, they are under the influence of tremendous political upheaval. In one country this may happen overnight, in others more slowly. The psychologist's task is to observe and describe the impact of these processes on the human mind. When once a nation is under the yoke of totalitarianism, when once its people have succumbed to the oversimplifications and blandishments of the would-be dictator, how does the leader maintain his power? What techniques does he use to make his countrymen docile followers of his bloody regime? Because man's mature self resists totalitarianism, the dictator must work and scheme constantly to keep his subjects in line and to immobilize their need for individual development, rebellion, and healthy growth. As we examine his techniques, we will come to a better understanding of totalitarianism and of the interaction between the dictator's methods and the personalities of his subjects. We need this understanding desperately, for we have to recognize that the forces in totalitaria that make humorless robots out of living men can also develop, albeit unwittingly, in the so-called free democratic societies. The strategy of terror. The weapon of terror has been used by tyrants from time immemorial to make a meek instrument of man. In totalitaria, the use of this weapon is refined to a science which can wipe out all opposition and dissent. The leaders of totalitaria rule by intimidation. They prefer loyalty through fear to loyalty through faith. Fear and terror freeze the mind and will. They may create a general psychic paralysis. In the panic caused by totalitarian terror, men feel separated from one another as by an impassable vacuum, and each man becomes a lonely, frightened soul. Even panicky hovering together could be suspected of being conspiracy against the state. Separated from any real emotional contact with his fellow men by his own inner isolation, the citizen of totalitaria becomes increasingly unable to fight against its dehumanizing influences. Totalitaria is constantly on the alert for social sinners. The critics of the system and accusation of dissent is equivalent to conviction in the public eye. Insinuation, calumny, and denunciation are staples of the totalitarian strategy. The entire nation is dedicated to the proposition that every man is a potential enemy of the regime. No one is excluded from the terror. Any man may be subjected to it, no matter how high his rank. The secret police create awe and panic inside the country, while the army serves to create awe and panic outside. Just the thought of an outbreak of terror, of even a possible future terror, makes men unwilling to express their opinions and expose themselves. Both the citizens of totalitaria and those of her neighbors are affected by this general fear. A clear example of how this fear paralysis operates in reality may be seen in the fact that as far back as 1948, Western Europeans who felt the shadow of anticipated totalitarian occupation thought it safer to criticize and attack their American friends than to find fault with a totalitarian enemy who might sweep in suddenly and without warning. In totalitaria, jails and concentration camps by the score are built in order to provoke fear and awe among the population. They may be called punishment or correction camps, but this is only a cheap justification for the truth. In these centers of fear, nobody is really corrected. He is, as it were, expelled from humanity, wasted, killed, but not too quickly, lest the terrorizing influence be diminished. The truth of the matter is that these jails are built not for real criminals, but rather for their terrorizing effect on the bystanders, the citizens of totalitaria. Jails represent a permanent menace, a continual threat. They put an almost insupportable strain on the empathy and imagination of those citizens who are, temporarily at least, on the outside of the barbed wire. In addition to the fear of undergoing the same cruel treatment, the fear of abasement, humiliation, and death, the very concept of the concentration camp arouses every man's deep-seated fear of being himself expelled from the community, of being alone, a wanderer in the desert, unloved and unwanted. There exist several milder forms of mass terror. For instance, the strategy of no political rest. In totalitaria, man is always caught by some form of official planning. He is always conscious of control and surveillance, of spying, leering powers lying in wait to chase him and to punish him. Even leisure time and holidays are occupied by some official program, some facts to be learned, some political meeting, some parade. Quiet and solitude no longer exist. There is no time for meditation, for pondering, for reminiscing. The mind is caught in a web of official thinking and planning. Even the delights of self-chosen silence are forbidden. Every citizen of totalitaria must join in the singing and the slogan shouting, and he becomes so caught in the constant activity that he loses the capacity to realize what is happening to him. The emphasis on more production by individuals, factories, and agricultural enterprises also can become a weapon of increased control and terror. The Stakhanovite movement in Russia, urging a constant increase in production norms, became a threat for many. The workers had to increase the pace of their labor and production, or they would be severely punished. The emphasis on pace and speed makes man more and more a soulless cog in the totalitarian wheel. Terror can almost never stop itself. It thrives on compliance and grows in a vacuum. Terror as a tool means a gradual transfer into terror as a goal. But terror is actually a self-defeating strategy. Man will ultimately revolt even under an absolute dictatorship. When men have been reduced to puppethood by totalitaria, they will finally become immune to all threats. The magic spell of terror will finally lose its force. First, the citizens of totalitaria will become dulled to the terror and will no longer consider even death a danger. Then a few will initiate the final revolt. For totalitaria's government by fear and terror fosters internal rebellion in the few who cannot be broken down. Even in Gleichgestaltet Nazi Germany, a resistance movement was active. And that was part 1 of chapter 7, and I will see you in part 2. We are reading from The Rape of the Mind. Not quite showing in the video there, but here it is, The Rape of the Mind. See you in the next video.